When it comes to tenacity and records of hauntings, the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall is one of the most famous, with a host of dramatic sightings since her death in 1726. The persistent ghost in question is believed to be Dorothy Walpole, sister of Britain's first Prime Minister, Robert Walpole of Raynham Hall, and although those who have encountered her ghost describe her appearance as ghastly and some even say malevolent, this is in contrast to how she was when she was living. Her beauty and charm was renowned. She did, though, exhibit a fondness for expensive gowns that was a constant strain on her husband's fortune. This may have led to serious disputes with her spouse, the second Marquess Townshend, known as Turnip Townshend, who introduced the vegetable to England and revolutionized crop rotation. The details of Dorothy's life at Raynham Hall are murky at best. What we do know is that she gave birth to at least 11 children, and that she lived her whole married life at Raynham Hall. Her grandfather had been made guardian of Charles Townshend, then 13 years old, and when in due course Dorothy was 15 and Charles 12 years older, he fell deeply in love and wanted to marry her. Dorothy's father refused to allow it, as he thought he would be accused of having his eye on the Townshend fortune and property. Meanwhile, Charles Townshend had married, but his wife died in 1713, and he and Dorothy were thrown together at last. It is recorded that Dorothy did not reciprocate Charles's feelings towards her. In fact, she found him downright repulsive. Historians cast little doubt that after a short time, the marriage proved to be an unhappy one. But whatever caused Charles to have a change of heart towards her can only be speculated on. He had her children put in his mother's charge. This was only the beginning of her misery. Rumours flew on swift wings to Charles that Dorothy was the mistress of Lord Wharton, a royal but penniless playboy. According to legend, Charles discovered Dorothy's secret love life in 1725 and was livid with fury. Incensed at being cuckolded, from then on he made sure she suffered a desolate existence. He was cruel and ill-tempered and punished her disloyalty by locking her up in her chambers and telling everyone that she had died, and even holding a mock funeral. In reality, Dorothy roamed the halls of the country house as a solitary prisoner, suffering intense loneliness, and who knows what else. She wasn't even allowed to visit her children, and was not released from this misery until her death from smallpox in 1726, aged only 39. Since her death, she is said to roam the hall in a brown satin dress, carrying a lantern, and those among the living who were unfortunate enough to have been graced with a display of her otherworldly delights took the terrifying memory of her visage to their grave. In the early 19th century, King George IV saw her while he was staying at the hall. He roused the whole household, tremulously conveying that he had been disturbed by the presence of a lady. He said that she stood beside his bed wearing a brown dress, and that her face was pale and her hair dishevelled. He declared shortly after breakfast that, "I will not pass another hour in this accursed house, for I have seen that what I hope to God I may never see again." The first ghostly sighting occurred during a Christmas gathering at Raynham Hall in 1835. A guest, Mr. Hawkins Esquire, claimed to have seen a translucent figure wandering the halls in a brown dress. Another corroborated the sighting. A certain Colonel Loftus was intrigued, and curiosity overcame his fear, enough so that he waited up the following night and managed to come face to face with her, adding that when he had approached her in the hall, she suddenly turned to him with a glowing face, but where her eyes should have been, there were only empty sockets. He made a sketch of what he had witnessed and showed it the next morning to the other guests, hoping it would inspire some of them to keep him company on his next late-night vigil. This artistic rendition aroused in many members of the staff the emotion of sheer terror, enough so that they gave immediate notice and fled the house. Lord Charles, whose home it was at that time, declared that he had seen the family ghost several times. Nevertheless, he was suspicious that this time some annoying practical joker might be responsible, and so he brought in a number of police in an attempt to flush out the practical joker. But neither the trickster or the brown lady herself made an appearance the following night. Eyeless and long-dead Dorothy received an unexpected reception when Captain Marryat, the author of a Napoleonic war novel titled Mr. Midshipman Easy, came to stay at Raynham Hall. The captain was not a believer in human bodies having any form beyond the wormy grave, and insisted on sleeping in the haunted bedroom, which contained a portrait of the brown lady. This oil portrait showed her wearing a brown satin dress with yellow trimmings, and he described her as a very harmless, innocent-looking young woman. Later in the evening, after retiring to bed, a lesser man might have felt uneasy, because in the dim and flickering candlelight, the eyes of the late Dorothy seemed to glitter with life, and the expression slowly transformed from harmless and innocent to a malevolent grimace. His daughter Florence recounted his experience in 1891. He took possession of the room in which the portrait of the apparition hung, and in which she had been often seen, and slept each night with a loaded revolver under his pillow. For 2 days, however, he saw nothing, and the third was to be the limit of his stay. On the third night, however, 2 young men, nephews of the baronet, knocked at his door as he was undressing to go to bed, and asked him to step over to their room, which was at the other end of the corridor, and give them his opinion on a new gun just arrived from London. The corridor was long and dark, for the lights had been extinguished, but as they reached the middle of it, they saw the glimmer of a lamp coming towards them from the other end. "One of the ladies going to visit the nurseries," whispered the young Townsends to my father. I have heard him describe how he watched her approaching nearer and nearer through the chink of the door, until, as she was close enough for him to distinguish the colours and style of her costume, he recognized the figure as the facsimile of the portrait of the brown lady. He had his finger on the trigger of his revolver, and was about to demand it to stop and give the reason for its presence there, when the figure halted of its own accord before the door behind which he stood, and holding the lighted lamp she carried to her features, grinned in a malicious and diabolical manner at him. This act so infuriated my father, who was anything but lamb-like in disposition, that he sprang into the corridor with a bound, and discharged the revolver right in her face. The figure instantly disappeared, the figure at which for several minutes 3 men had been looking together, and the bullet passed through the outer door of the room on the opposite side of the corridor, and lodged in the panel of the inner one. My father never attempted again to interfere with the brown lady of Raynham. A third sighting occurred in 1926, when the then Lady Townsend's son saw the brown lady on the stairs while playing with a friend. The two were able to identify the woman from the portrait of Dorothy Walpole hanging on the haunted room's wall. In the 1920s, Sir Henry Birkin decided to remain awake all night in the hopes of catching a glimpse of poor Dorothy. But although he saw and sensed nothing untoward, his dog showed signs of acute terror in the wee hours and couldn't be persuaded to remain by its master's side. Marchioness Townsend claims there are other restless spirits at Raynham, such as two ghost children, a phantom spaniel whose paws patter on the staircase, although he is never seen, and the charming Red Cavalier. This is the Duke of Monmouth, Charles II's ill-fated son, who once stayed at Raynham Hall with his royal father. He haunts the bedroom he once used, now known as the Monmouth Room, and the Marchioness tells the story of a lovely Deb of the Year who insisted on sleeping there, hoping for a visit from the notorious ladies' man. But despite the Duke's well-known notoriety when it came to the opposite sex, she remained sadly alone that evening. The next occupant of the room a few days later was a spinster of uncertain age, who, according to her hostess, was sadly destined to live a drab life, devoid of romance. However, she woke up that night to find the dashing Red Cavalier standing at the end of her bed, smiling in a most encouraging manner. Before he departed, he gave her a charming courtly bow and faded away through the wall, leaving her with a cherished memory of her amorous visitor. The brown lady continued to be sighted by various people over the next century. However, the most remarkable sighting of her occurred on September the 19th, 1936. A photograph exists that might give us a lasting image of the ghost of poor Dorothy Walpole. This was not taken by a paranormal investigator conducting research, but was the work of Captain Hubert C. Provand, a photographer working for Country Life magazine. He and his assistant, Indra Shearer, were photographing the hall for a general article about the country house. After taking a photo of the hall's grand staircase, they were making preparations for a second, when Shearer witnessed the nebulous formation of a vapory form gradually assuming the appearance of a woman. He quickly urged Captain Provand to take an exposure, which he did, although he himself had seen nothing. He protested that Indra Shearer must have imagined it, and declared that even if there was something there, nothing would appear when the negative was developed. Indra Shearer insisted that he had seen a figure so ethereal that the stairs were visible through it, and later, when they were developing the negatives, the captain could see that there was definitely something appearing on the photo paper in the chemical tray. Indra Shearer hurried downstairs to the chemist below their studio and brought Benjamin Jones back to be a witness that the negative had not been tampered with. Later, a number of experts examined it and were satisfied that the picture had not been faked in any way. What they saw, freshly developed, was the image of a semi-transparent form drifting down the stairs. The photo was published in Country Life on December the 16th, 1936. The late Marchioness Townsend told Dennis Bardens in the 1960s that she had seen the figure several times, and that at times the sound of whispers and the swish of silken skirts testify that the painting gallery is alive with the quality of who ruffled it, in the days when the splendour of the great house was undiminished. Sometimes in one room, the heavy chairs which are usually set against the walls are found in the morning companionably grouped around a large card table. The current Townsend family living in Raynham Hall believe that Dorothy continues to walk the corridors of the estate today. However, they don't believe Provand and Shearer's photograph is real. When discussing the haunting, Lord Charles Raynham, the son of the present Marquis Townsend of Raynham, told the BBC, "She isn't there to haunt the house, but she is still there. I know she's there, and I'm glad she's around." Perhaps Dorothy's demeanour has softened over the passage of time, and she no longer feels the need to present to terrified guests the cavities where her eyeballs should be. A descendant of Lady Walpole, the Honourable Jonathan Walpole, said even if it wasn't his ancestor in the photo, she may well still be haunting the hall. "The father of one of my friends swore that she walked past him on the stairs once." Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. What did you think of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall? Do you believe in ghosts? That's my question today. Do you believe in ghosts? The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall might be real, or at least real to the people who think they have seen her, or have seen her. But the photo, that's another story. I don't think it is real. Have a look at it first, though. What does it remind you of? What does it remind you of? This site here is courtesy of curiousarchive.com. I will leave the link. So, despite Harry Price's affirmation that the negative of the photograph is entirely innocent of any faking, others weren't as convinced. An investigation of the photo by London's The Society for Psychical Research 1 year later in 1937 believed the Spectre was the result of the camera being shaken during a 6-second exposure. Another theory is that the photographers smeared grease on the camera lens to get the spooky effect, or that the image is the result of one photograph being superimposed over another. And others have mentioned the suspicious similarities between the image of the Brown Lady and the carved statues of the Virgin Mary. I think that's what it is. I think it's a superimposed image of a statue of the Virgin Mary. But it's great. It's great fun. And they got a lot of attention. It stirred people's imaginations and got them probably a lot of fame and maybe a little bit of fortune. Who knows? I don't mind. You know, they did a lot of faking of photos. They're doing it now today. You just have a look. There's a lot of YouTube videos going on with it, so why should it be different then? I think it's great fun. Doesn't mean I don't believe in ghosts just because people fake photos. And there was lots of Victorian era fake ghost photos. You can find a plethora of them on the internet. They're great fun, you know. And some people wanted these photos to remind them of lost loved ones. They would have them sort of looking over their shoulder. It was also a huge trend back then. And now, my dear viewers, I am going to tell you about my very own ghost story, my own ghost experience. You can take it as you will. You can believe it or you don't believe it. I will just tell the facts. I will not embellish it. I will just tell you what happened way back in the 1980s when I was living in Sydney. Some of you may recall I was living in a sort of a dilapidated old mansion. They're called Federation mansions. They're not huge. There was 3 of them in a row, And the one I lived in had belonged to a knight, apparently, as the story goes. That's what my landlord told me. And the two houses cushioning it on each side, they had belonged to, well, they belonged to him as well, to this knight, and he had his servants and staff living in those, apparently. I did a bit of a rummage, and I did find a photo of the house facade. I did some months ago show you a watercolor painting of the same facade. And couple of the interior. I do have more of the interior, but I just can't find them. I'm going to have to do a big rummage. I've got so much stuff. Yeah, so this is the facade. My quarters there are at the top. It actually goes right back. The roof, it looks like it stops there, but on the other side where the balcony is, the house goes much further back. It's quite a rambling old place. The window there, the bay window, inside there is where I saw the ghost, and it was witnessed by somebody else. A friend of mine witnessed it. I'm going to tell you very soon. It was an objective experience, not subjective. If two people see the same thing, exactly the same thing. Anyway, I'm going to explain that in detail in a minute. I just want to show you a little bit of the interior. What a shame I couldn't find the other photos immediately today. I will find them eventually. I should have took more. You never think back then. I actually had a video of me walking around it when I first moved in at the age of 19, and I do not know where that video is today. It could be with me, it could be lost, I'm not sure. Anyway, so here's a photo I found today, actually. I've just snipped the head of a dear departed friend. He died several years ago. He's actually affectionately got his arm around Oddie there, so this was late in my residency at the house. So you can see in the background, I've got the girl with the pearl earring print, and also the Lady of Shalott to the left, and an ancient Union Jack right to the right there. So yeah, it's not much of a shot, I know. It's all I could find, and I have one final one here to show you. So this was a room I had to the rear, which I just used for storing art materials. I fancied myself as an artist back then, you know. I wasn't too bad. Did a few things, but I also used to sort of find these old frames and buy them at auctions and put old prints in, and drawings from friends and paintings from friends and my own paintings, and I kept frames for paintings that I imagined I was going to do. Some of them did materialize and some of them didn't. So there you go, one photo. I'd forgotten about this, actually, about all these frames that I'd kept. A lot of them I used, and I ended up selling stuff. I got desperate for money, so I would sort of fix things up and put them in auction. You know the story, the old starving artist thing. Anyway, because of the lack of the suitable interior photo for the ghost story I'm about to tell, I'm going to use a substitute from one I found in the internet, so it will certainly add to the atmosphere, I can assure you. So here we go. Get your cups of cocoa, nestle in by the fire. I'm going to tell my ghost story. The night that I saw the apparition, I was out with two work colleagues, and I know this was quite early on when I first moved there, because I remember these work colleagues. I haven't seen them for years. And we went down to the Coogee Bay Hotel. People who live in Sydney would know about that. It's a very famous beachfront hotel. We went down there to have beers and play pool, or I think the Americans call it snooker. Anyway, we went down there, had quite a few beers. I'm not going to deny that. We weren't blotto though. And then we decided to go back to my place, get some food, and and take a 6-pack of beer back. So we got back. It was, maybe about 11 o'clock at night. And as we were sitting there chatting and talking, suddenly a huge electrical storm came in. That would happen fairly regularly. I lived not far from the sea, and these electrical storms would come in over the Pacific Ocean. It was a huge raging storm. It was wonderful, actually. And suddenly we had a blackout. The electricity went off. It was pitch black. Luckily I had a candle. I lit the candle. That didn't stop us. It really was quite, it was great. You could hear the thunder crashing and the rain coming down. Anyway, we carried on talking, and I was sitting at a table right near the bay window, and my friend was opposite me, and another friend was sitting on one of the two rocking chairs I had. They were like 70s checked cord rocking chairs, if anyone remembers them. They were really quite comfy, actually. And a friend was there, and he had fallen asleep. And me and this other guy were still talking at the table. And next minute, and there was a candle. I do remember this candle in front. Next minute, I turned around, and I could see my friend on the other chair, and the empty chair. I turned around, and there was a guy sitting on that chair. And I thought, who is he? I don't remember inviting this person. And I can still see him now. He was very, well, like he was there. I thought he was a real person. He had black hair, like jet black hair, and a very pale face. And he had an olive green suit on with a matching waistcoat. I remember that. It was very old-fashioned clothing. And I thought, did we meet this guy? I was a bit vague at this stage. And he was chatting animatedly at me and at my friend. He kept looking at me and him, back and forth, and talking. The only thing was, though, there was no sound coming out. There was absolutely no voice. But he was not sinister in any way. He was very happy and talking, and I thought, well, who is this guy? And then I thought, am I imagining this? Because how come there's no sound coming out of his mouth? So I turned around to see if my friend had registered this, and he was looking directly at the chair too. So he obviously was seeing it. And then I turned back, and he was still chatting away, this guy, and suddenly he just disappeared. He didn't fade. He just disappeared right in front of my eyes like a flash. And then I looked at my friend and I went, did you see that? And then we just started freaking out. He said, yeah, I saw it too. I saw it too. And we were so freaked out about that we woke our friend up. He didn't know what was going on. He thought we were trying to wind him up. So it totally freaked us out. We were talking about it and we were very excited. And the other guy who'd been asleep in the chair, he got rather agitated because he had missed out on it and he still thought we were sort of winding him up. So he went home and we were talking about it, and it really affected the other guy because he was an atheist, and what he saw was not something that he could grasp. I couldn't grasp it either, and I believed in ghosts before that. It was just so incredible because it looked so lifelike and real. And I did, as I was staring at this ghost, for want of a better term, I could see a guy leaning against the fireplace, a young guy, but he was not so distinct. And my friend had saw that too, and he actually got the impression there was quite a few others in the room, not just that guy leaning against the mantelpiece. But the most distinct one was the chap in the chair with the jet black hair. It rhymes too. So, if it wasn't a ghost, what was it? What could it be? Could I have projected that image into his mind, or could he have projected that image into my mind? I mean, that would be fantastic in itself. That would be an amazing thing. Whatever it was, he saw it and I saw it, and I can't explain it to this day. I really can't explain it. He couldn't either. He described exactly the same clothing as I had saw. I don't know how to explain it, but that was my ghost experience. This is the strange thing. If it was a residual haunting, just like an echo of somebody who had lived there, then they would be going about and doing the thing as it was back in their time. So, for instance, I've heard of residual hauntings where the ghost will be walking 2 feet in the air because that was where the original floor was in that dwelling at that time, and it had been renovated over time and the floor had been lowered. So that's like a recording. But this ghost was sitting in my 1970s chair, my old chair that I got from the second-hand shop. He was sitting in that chair, looking very comfortable too. How could he be in that chair? Because there was no way that chair was there back in 1880, let's say. That chair wasn't there. It wasn't there in 1910. It wasn't there in 1940. That chair was in that position and he was sitting in it. So that is what I can't figure out. You tell me what I experienced. And remember, my friend saw exactly the same thing. So I'm looking forward to your answers. As I say, I'm not trying to force you to believe in ghosts. I'm just telling you my experience. And I've had a few more, but I will save that for another time. So that's it. You had 2 stories on this presentation. You had the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, and you had my ghost story. That is the bonus. I'd love to hear your comments on any personal experiences that you've had. Maybe I'll even have that as a competition. one day. Who knows? Anyway, on that note, I'm going to say goodbye and God bless. Until next time, my friends.